Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back to the NeuroVerse podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Mrs. Huck, who's someone who worked for 6 to 7 years in the school counseling department of a private school. And today, she's gonna key us in a little bit about depression and anxiety in school age kids and how school counselors kind of navigate through that. So, yeah, thank you for coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna ask you a few questions. So I'll just kick it off with this one. So how common are depression and anxiety among specifically high school students?
Yeah, so it is actually honestly a lot more common, I think, than we'd like to believe. I worked predominantly with the middle and high school students at my school,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very common, and I think there are, a lot of different reasons. Just at that age, there's so much change happening, and there's just a lot of stressors with the, responsibility of school and grades. But then you also have issues with just social life and friends, and, just so much going on, even with social media. So I do think that anxiety and depression are, just so rampant.
Yeah.
In school age kids, it's getting younger and younger. But yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet it is. Um, so along those same lines, what are some early signs or symptoms that teachers or counselors or anyone that works in a school like can maybe notice in students struggling with mental health?
Yeah, definitely. So I think with students, a lot of times you see a little bit of a change in their behavior. So they might become a little bit more withdrawn than usual, a slight change in their personality. There could be an effect like with their grades. You might sense just them not as focused in the classroom. I would say that from a teacher standpoint, because I was a teacher before.
Mm-hmm.
From a counseling standpoint, I mean, a lot of times it may not be something that you as a counselor are seeing, because you're not necessarily being able to observe a student
Yeah.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times teachers will refer kids, or sometimes their peers. Their peers will refer them, and they'll, come and say that, like, hey, I think, something may be a little bit going on with so and so. And a lot of times, when you check in with them, it's apparent, or like they're very open to, share that, there's something going on that's weighing on them.
Mm. Okay. Interesting. So kind of delving a little deeper into that, what are the most common causes or triggers of anxiety in high school students?
Oh goodness. I mean, I think honestly these days, the triggers of anxiety for students, especially like middle school and high school, I feel like it's just like social stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of stuff is like driven by like social media.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with girls predominantly, like there's a lot of, sometimes as we call it, like, drama,
Yeah.
different things that happen just with, friendships. But also it's just unique, especially these days, because it is kind of, I guess you could say, like inflamed through, just different things that happen on like Snapchat, or different things that happen, in just the contacts, or the friends, or blocking, or these groups. And they cause so much, anxiety and stress.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, like peer relationships are like a really, really big thing that cause anxiety
Yeah.
for young people. And just sometimes just the pressure, like the pressure to have to deal with it all. It's really hard, because even though you're so interconnected, and you have these connections, but it can just still feel really isolating when you're dealing with it, individually on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think there's like maybe some like expectations that some kids may feel, due to whatever it may be through social media, regarding friendships or like keeping up friendships or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, they always say like back in the day, well, you know what I think it is? I think it's like kids or like young people, they can't just be off, right?
Uh-huh.
So back in the day, there's this like notion that when, you were at school, like, you had your issues or you had your stuff, at the playground, quote unquote. But these days, it's kind of like social media is like this 24/7 connection,
Mm-hmm.
to everybody, right? Essentially, like the world, but even just your social group, the connections of your social group with other people. And I think that's a lot of pressure for young
Yeah.
people
Mm-hmm.
to like never be able to kind of disconnect. So yeah, pressure to also like meet certain standards of coolness, of,
Mm-hmm.
looks, of things that you have, but also just this, I don't know, just like appearances, if that makes sense, of like
Yeah, yeah.
status, all that stuff that comes together. Yeah, for sure. It's a lot. It's a lot to navigate as somebody that's young.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So to kind of cope with these struggles that some of these kids may be having, what strategies do you recommend, coping strategies for students experiencing anxiety or depression?
I think, one of the coping strategies is to really talk to somebody who they can trust. Unfortunately, like it's not always somebody that they can talk to. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes, like, talking to parents isn't really helpful, because if it's coming to parents who maybe might get upset, to hear something that they don't necessarily are happy with, or maybe who may judge their feelings. So that can be really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's worth it to like give it a chance, and to try to reach out, hopefully to the parents, but if not, just somebody who can like really be there.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's challenging is sometimes, your peers are not the best person
Yeah.
just because they're going through their own stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that can be really heavy for somebody your own age to like have to deal with, and, feel like they're, listening to all of that. Ideally, it's amazing to be able to have access to like, mental health and a therapist. I know that's not always accessible
Mm-hmm.
to everyone, but other than that, I mean, I do think, taking a break from social media is often really, really helpful. Getting involved in like other things like sports or hobbies, of course, exercising,
Mm-hmm.
um, taking time. I know it sounds cliche, but just like, like breathing. I mean, I
Yeah.
know sometimes it sounds so silly, but just certain like coping mechanisms or like
Mm-hmm.
grounding techniques to kind of slow down, right? When our mind is racing, we have so many thoughts and just anxious thoughts crippling us, then it can just be really helpful to like get out of nature, or just like slow down a little bit with breathing and things like that. I find that really helpful.
Yeah. So you'd say the main things are kind of, finding a trusted adult, speaking to
Mhm.
them, and then along with that, disconnecting kind of, from whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I always go back to social media, but I just think that it just exacerbates the problem so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's easier said than done, because it's like your connection. So it's like a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be connected, but then it can cause so much. But yeah, just having, certain periods. But also, yeah, I mean, if there's something that's particularly troubling, and your anxiety is like tied to that, I guess kind of, trying to analyze at least like if this really is good for you. It's hard, right? Because you're still like not wanting to,
Yeah. Yeah.
disconnect. So I think that's the struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Um, and this is kind of along the same lines, but what role do mindfulness and stress management techniques play in improving mental health?
Wow. So, I think it's talked about a lot. And I think until someone really does it, it's like you don't see like the quote unquote, like the magic of it.
Yeah.
Or like the usefulness of it. But I think it's so easy just to get so caught up in, your thoughts. And it's almost like, you think of like a hamster, and like it's just like running and running and running. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really essentially what, anxiety is, or anxious thoughts. And it's so hard to just stop it or to calm it. But, when you kind of are mindful, you're being in the present moment, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the here and now, and you're kind of taking a break from just go, go, go in your thoughts. So even just, like for example, on our Apple Watches, we have like the breathing or,
Yeah, yeah.
and sometimes it's just like it's annoying, right? You're like,
Uh-huh.
okay, I don't want to like sit there and breathe. But even just forcing yourself just to be like slower, whatever that looks like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can just be like going outside and like focusing on the sun and,
Yeah.
the flowers that you see. Just slowing down, whatever that looks like for you, I think it's really, really helpful to just, the chaos of what happens with your thoughts in your mind often.
Mm. Okay. Interesting. Um, so, as someone who worked, in a school for many many years, what resources do you know that the school provides to help students struggle with mental health challenges?
So I think in a lot of schools these days they have like SEL, like social emotional learning, like
Yeah, yeah.
inbuilt in the curriculum a lot of times. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, as schools, we've made a lot of headway into recognizing the impact of like mental health on students and also just how much like it affects like, academics and grades and student success. So I think overall, I think it's pretty cool how it's being taught at a younger age again and again, like, more so than ever. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that is really good. I think it just depends on the school, obviously, and the resources.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think overall that's kind of a really good thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And as as a previous teacher, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
what are some things that you've seen or done, or what can be done? What can teachers do to create a more supportive, and like inclusive and mentally healthy classroom environment?
Yeah, so I think, for teachers, it's really important for them to just understand, like outside of the context of someone being a student,
Uh huh.
they wear many, many hats, and like, for example, your class is not their entire world. It's just one little subset of everything else that's on their plate.
Yeah.
And like your student is struggling because they have, they're on the sports teams, they're on in the clubs, they're in their extracurriculars, and then they're taking all these classes to kind of, try to, have a good GPA or whatever. So I think just kind of mentally remembering that and also just keeping the humanity in the classroom, letting your students know that, if they are particularly stressed and
Mm-hmm.
they can reach out to you and that you will believe them that, hey, X, Y, and Z is happening, or, you may not even feel comfortable sharing, but just like, hey, I have a lot and I'm really, really, really stressed. Do you think I could have maybe a little bit more time?
Mm-hmm.
And just, you may not always be able to, depending on, the assignment or what's
Yeah.
going on with, the grades or whatever. But having students feel comfortable kind of, even being able to express that and to have that support, I think goes a really, really long way. And having students just feel supported,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and also having the open conversation, like, just I think outside of whatever subject you teach, just kind of like bringing in just, real life stuff
Uh
and
huh.
normalizing like stress and normalizing, that things can feel really overwhelming. And that's very normal for any of us. Like, no one's outside of the realm of just feeling like, oh God, I'm just, there's so much and I feel like I can't do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And I know a little earlier you mentioned that some teachers they can recognize students, maybe not having good mental health by dropping grades. At home, how can parents recognize and address mental health issues?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with parents, it's just, well, it kind of goes back to like what type of relationship, someone has with their children, because
Yeah.
obviously every parent and child they don't have the same relationship. But just noticing like when something kind of just feels off, and as a parent, you just have kind of a little bit of a gut feeling like, hey, like something feels different.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're more just, to themselves, or maybe they're sleeping more. Maybe they're not as expressive, or maybe they're getting more upset. So those types of things, I think, don't ignore them, always try to, ask in, not obviously a nagging way, but just in a way where it's like, hey, this is what I've noticed, and like, I'm here for you. And, they may not want to share right away, but, obviously if it's coming from a place of care, the hope is that they would be able to, express themselves and maybe say what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that always help. Um, and thank you for sharing all this. And
Of course.
is there anything, maybe one closing thought or message on mental health that you'd like to share? It's if not, that's totally fine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what's important to remember is that like we're human, right? We're not robots. So every single human throughout the span of our life is going to go through ups and downs. And it's not like when we think of mental health of like this one very specific or like this one moment in time. It's just, there's highs and lows throughout life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to kind of just normalize that it's just health in general. And it's something that we have to continuously work on. And, the support is so important that you feel supported, you have, an ear. And a shoulder, and that it's just destigmatized. Like it's just normal, right? They always talk about physical health, like we tend to that. So of course, the same way, even more so with our heart and our mind and our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more that we support each other, then it can be something that can absolutely always be worked on and established to, be in a healthy place for a
Yeah.
person's success and overall wellness.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us an insight into your expertise.
Of
Uh,
course, glad to have been able to help.
awesome. And thank you everyone for watching.